Wow. That's the biggest clapping I've ever had when I got to walk on this stage, I must say. Well, ladies and gentlemen, members of the class of 2013, it's such a pleasure to see you here this evening. This is a pretty amazing day. We've gone from fist bumps to the first class lecture in about 12 hours. And that is a pretty wonderful journey, a good start to what is going to be 4 years of a magical journey here. And I have a real pleasure that I get to address you both at both ends of that pretty exciting day when you make your first day officially campus day as the class of 2013. So here we are at the first class lecture. This has always been one of my favorite Dartmouth traditions. It's a time that we designed to start your life at Dartmouth with a discussion between a faculty member about the great issues of our times, about the biggest ideas or the thorniest intellectual puzzles. And what's even better is that this is just the first of what will be hundreds or even thousands of such discussions about these types of issues that you're going to have with your classmates, with your faculty, with your friends, your family back home. And that's what we really do dream for you in your time here at Dartmouth as you begin your own academic and intellectual journey of discovery. The first class lecture, has been structured very differently by different faculty. Classes before have read the old classics. Sometimes they've read new books. Sometimes they've read fiction. They've read nonfiction. They've read poetry. They've read commentary. They've even watched movies, listened to symphonies, and written essays. But this time, I think you have a very special, unique opportunity. You're having the chance to meet and ask questions of the actual heroes of the book that you read, that remarkable book, Mountains Beyond Mountains, written by Tracy Kidder. So up here with me are three very incredible heroes of that book. And they were people that didn't believe in words like no, or impossible, or aim for less. And those people are, of course, President Jim Yong Kim, Dr. Paul Farmer, and Ms. Ophelia Dahl. Tonight, they're going to talk to you a bit about their own journey in global health and try to give you some insight from in their own words of what that time was like for them, how they developed their ideas, and what it was like to work on the problems that they were addressing, covered in that book, leading to what they're doing now. I know they really hope that they're going to talk for a fairly short period of time, and they're really looking forward to you asking questions. So you need to listen to what they're saying and think about the questions that you want to ask them, because we really want to bring it around and have that full question period. This, of course, is a time when you have a chance to listen to your president and their colleagues talk about their own journey. But what's particularly special about this topic, I think, is that it speaks very directly to things that so many of you expressed even in your applications when you're talking about coming to Dartmouth. And that's your optimism and the hopefulness that so many people in this room, and in fact of your generation, are expressing about your ability and your determination to shape a better world and a global future. So not only are you lucky to hear from these individuals who have made a difference in the lives of so many people, they have said that they feel very privileged to be talking to you at such an exciting and meaningful time in your lives. So I'm just going to take a couple more minutes and do very brief introductions to three people that you already really do know. And I'm going to start off with President Kim. As Dartmouth's first physician president and an academic anthropologist, you all know that he has been a tireless advocate for social justice. He's pushed the boundaries and he's fought to make the world a better place in everything that he's done. Now, he told me I was not allowed to repeat any of the many things that he's done and that you've heard about earlier in the day, so I'm going to honor that request. But I think you also do know that in every position that he has had, He has really been a person who thought about teaching the world. He's a teacher, too, that with determination and innovation, intractable problems become tractable. I've been so lucky that in just the last couple of months, when I've had the chance to get to know Jim better personally, I can say that he is bringing that same optimism, his determination, and his never say never attitude to everything he is also thinking about doing at Dartmouth and all the dreams that he has for you as the president of Dartmouth. If you spend just a few minutes with him, you're going to find yourself asking and being asked questions and jumping right immediately into that tussle of back and forth argument and deep passion that every faculty member hopes will be the hallmark of your time here at Dartmouth. That makes me certain that the aspirations that we all share for a just and compassionate world and for a passion of seeing people accomplish things will lead Dartmouth also to an exciting future with Jim at the helm. Our second panelist is Dr. Paul Farmer. Dr. Farmer, as you may know, is the Maud and Lillian Presley Professor of Social Medicine and the chair of the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine at Harvard Medical School. He's also chief of the Division of Global Health Equity at Brigham and Women's Hospital. He, too, does not want a long list of all of his accomplishments, so I'm going to just talk a little bit about what he's done in Partners in Health. Of course, he's a founding director of Partners in Health. He was recently appointed UN Deputy Special Envoy to Haiti. As you all know from reading Mountain Beyond Mountains, he's worked there since 1983. And along with President Kim, he was awarded the MacArthur Genius Award in 1993 for this work. He received his BA from Duke, MD from Harvard Medical School, and a PhD in anthropology from Harvard University. President Kim recently said of Dr. Farmer that he's one of my heroes and closest friend in the world. They call him the modern-day Albert Schweitzer. He's a person who works tirelessly for the health of poor people, and I have been very touched by the extent to which young people are motivated and moved by his life story. Our third panelist is Ms. Ophelia Dahl. Ms. Dahl is an advocate for the health and the rights of the poor. Again, as many of you know, or all of you know from reading the book, she first traveled to impoverished central Haiti in 1983 at just age 18 to volunteer her services at the Eye Care Haiti, which was a very small clinic. It was, of course, in Haiti where she met Paul Farmer, and since then, along with President Kim, they've been working as an incredibly close team to bring health care to some of the least privileged people on the planet. They share a belief that all people, whether rich or poor, should have the benefit of access to the same high-quality health care. Ms. Dahl currently serves as the Executive Director of Partners in Health. Under her leadership, Partners in Health has forged groundbreaking successes in treating the diseases of poor and promoting health care, and they have a real specialty of working in areas that are being hit by political conflict, poverty, and international neglect. So the areas of the world where we really do need to provide some assistance. She's a graduate of Wellesley College. Ms. Dahl also serves on the board of her family's foundation to honor the work of her father, the late writer Roald Dahl, whom I'm sure many of you have held as a special favorite, as have I. And she's been engaged in philanthropic work in the United States and her native England. I asked Jim recently about what it must have been like for Ophelia to be a part of that team. And he laughed and he said, wow, she was a woman, she wasn't a doctor, and she was dealing with these two crazy guys. He said, but she is better at working with us than anyone. And I think it's that affection, that shared sense of purpose that has brought these three people together. So please join me in welcoming them one more time.
So it's great to see you guys all again. You're going to be hearing a lot from me over the next 4 years, So I want to start off by just asking Paul and Ophelia to reflect a little bit on what the experience was like, and even to go all the way back to the undergraduate years. You know, I first met Ophelia when she was applying to be, what's the name of the word, the scholar?
Davis Scholar.
Davis Scholar. She finished high school and then went to Haiti, and so she entered Wellesley later. And I had just met them, and Paul was in a car accident and was finishing up Ophelia's, let me just call them by what I really call them. This is Pell and this is Min. This is what we call it. I can't call them by their real names. So Min was applying to medical school, to Wellesley, and Pell was writing her letter of recommendation, but had just gotten in a car accident, was in a cast up to his thigh. So he finished the letter, and then I got in a car and delivered it directly to Wellesley. And it was that delivery that got Min into Wellesley. I take complete credit for it. But that's how we started at that point in our lives. And so let me just say, Pat, why don't you just talk a little bit? These are the class of 2013, just starting out. What was it like in those early days? And what were you thinking when you were at Duke? And tell us a little bit about how it all evolved.
First, I'd like to say that, as usual, you have the details wrong. That we met before that.
Well, that's true. That's true. We met way before that. In fact, let me tell you the real story. The real story.
Wait.
The real story is I was in my first year of medical school.
There you go.
And Paul was already a pretty well-developed anthropologist. He'd written papers already. I just started being interested in anthropology. And I met him during a snowstorm in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And as we were talking, he had just told me that he met this woman named Ophelia Dahl. And his words were, "It could be love."
Yeah, you know, Jim, would you, this is highly
And
this is what they call in
and
legal
it has
terms
been
entrapment.
up until today.
Entrapment. First of all, let me try to be a little bit more dignified. President Kim, 17th president of Dartmouth, and say welcome to all of you. Can I start again? And say something avuncular in class of 2013. We're so honored to be. It's all true, by the way. But yes, that was 1983, and Ophelia and I came up here a little earlier tonight to see Jim's kids, and Jim's son said, "Well, what are you going to say tonight?" So first of all, he said, "I don't know where Dad is," and I said, "Yeah, well, we're not looking for him. We came to see you." He said, "What are you going to say?" And I told him that I was going to talk about when we were just starting in college, and he just rolled his eyes, by the way. I thought that was the most absurd thing. I went, blah, 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 blah. That's what he said. He said, "You always say that." And there's some truth to it. And the reason that we talk about when we were young and in college is because that's how we got on the trajectory that we're still on today. And I think that the lesson in that is the lesson that I'd like to share, and I'm honored to be sitting here with Jim and Ophelia, who I met them both in 1983, and that was right after I went to Duke. And the reason that I was, I went to Duke and he went to Brown, therefore I had a better undergraduate preparation, and was already studying medical anthropology. I can only say that because we're at the number one
undergraduate institution in the
world. I have to be careful. I have to be careful because at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning I have to give a lecture at a little community-based college in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But 1983, this is what I would like to share, and then is a couple of messages that may seem obvious, and Jim's son, my godson, may say blah 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 blah. But the two things that I'd like to underline before we open this up to a real discussion, is why did we become friends in 1983? And I think one of the answers is we were prepared to become friends. It's true that there's always happenstance in life. And I could think of some great quotation from Louis Pasteur. I forget what it's written in Vanderbilt, blah, 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 Louis Pasteur. I believe, in French, I'm not going to say it in French,
Chance
don't worry.
favors the prepared mind.
Yeah, chance favors the prepared mind, right? Yeah. What does that mean for us? Well, Ophelia comes from Buckinghamshire, England, and ends up in central Haiti. I come from, Florida to Duke and end up in central Haiti. Then I go to Harvard to interview for medical school. Why? Because I wanted to go to Harvard to go to medical school because there was a medical anthropology program, and Jim was already identified as being in it, as being having that interest. So, 1983, we could say, well, it's just a lucky chance, and that's true. But we had prepared. Jim had been interested in these issues at college, and I had as well. And Ophelia, I think she's the marvel among us, because how she got from England to Haiti at 18 that was even younger than Jim and I, when we were sort of committed to these issues of global health. So it's not that we're stuck in a rut, I would hope. It's that you learn things when you're in college and when you're young, and you meet people as you have already, this year, today, who may be involved in the rest of your lives. I would hope you're as lucky as we are, in that you're going to make friends here at Dartmouth who are going to be involved in the rest of your lives. And now that's 27 years ago almost. All of our adult lives, obviously we've done different things with our lives. Jim and I are interested in different things, even though people would say, "Oh, you guys went through the same training program, and we had the same mentor." One of our teachers actually passed away yesterday, who helped set up this program. He was 87, but we've all done different and complementary things, and we started them when we were young. That is one message. That's one of the two messages that I'd like to get out there. Is people say all the time, you're in this island of privilege. You're in Hanover. You're at Dartmouth. These are the best years of your life. I'm afraid that's all true. In the sense that there's a lot of great things happening, but if you should seize these 4 years, and maybe some of you it'll be longer because you'll do other things, and it'll be 5 years. Some of you will flunk out, of course.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
No, you won't.
But that's the first of the things. So, we took it seriously. Probably we were maybe too serious about some things, although and the second is, and this is why we're here, and it was mentioned already by the dean, is the optimism that is necessary to face, the world's troubles. I just came here from Africa. I just flew here. In fact, I went from Haiti to Africa and to back here, and I was hoping that once Jim was, named the president of Dartmouth, he'd get me a jet so I could just do that, Haiti, Dartmouth. Is that a possibility, Jim?
No.
Fiscal crisis. But the second message is that we need you. We, of course, as the three of us, but global health and social justice and the serious problems that are in the world, whether in this country or in the ones where we work, or because we work in the United States too, they require real commitment and optimism, and that's a combination that you don't always see. First of all, people who are living in poverty, they don't get the sort of chances that you have and that we've had, and we have to fight so they can have those chances. And to me, that requires an optimism, right? I mean, if you if you plant a tree, I don't want to sound corny, but if you plant a tree, really quite literally in a deforested area, say, what does that mean? It means you think that tree is going to survive. You don't think it's going to be eaten by a goat the next day or get swept away by a hurricane, right? And that sort of optimism, planting things, not so much literally as metaphorically, is what we need to do, I think, now, as your generation will do it better than we did. And we're devout believers in your generation, in the first globals, or whatever you'd like to call yourselves. What is it you call yourselves? I'm not sure, but we're real believers in your generation. And when I was a freshman at Duke, of course, I was on the varsity basketball squad.
No, he was not.
And so, actually, I did what I think some of you guys did. There was a project at Duke, like the one that many people do here. Go into the woods, a walk in the woods. Mm-hmm. And I just remember meeting people that week. First week of school, and a lot of them are still friends of ours to this day, and that's an important third message. I said 2, but I'll start with 3. Be nice to each other, form friendships that can endure. It's a little bit of variation of the first message, that it could happen to you, that you meet people you'll be working with the rest of your lives during this week or next year or in a seminar. But, take care of each other, be nice to each other. And as corny as that sounds, I think it's something that we've grown to value more and more as we get older. These friendships are really critical. And I'm very grateful for mine with Jim and Ophelia. So, thank you.
Yeah. What's reflections?
Great friendships. I think we've underlined that twice, but knowing at a young age that we connected immediately, I'd say was enormously important. Just to go back to the love theme that Jim brought up, I have to say I was taken aback when I first met Paul, and we spent a few months in Haiti together. Then I left Haiti. And I left him with lots of the things that I gathered in Haiti, including novels and various things like that, books, novels. And I said, here, you can have my, novels, and just, have something to read. He said, that's great, thank you so much. And then I went back to England, and about a month or 2 weeks later, I got a letter from him, and then I got this book report, and I'm a
nerd.
You've fallen in love with you have 2 academic. I've hung out with intellectuals and academics, and I was falling for him, and he was falling for me. And his idea of wooing was to send me a book report, a 6-page.
Not what I thought. We're here to talk about global health.
I don't recommend that strategy, by the way, guys. As a general rule.
We're here to talk about engagement with social justice issues.
What that did, though, is it because I had fallen for him already in a major way. We only had to spend a couple of hours together, and I knew that this was someone I wanted to spend some enormous part of my life with. That the way he responded to me then, when I left him books, or when we traveled around Haiti together, taught me something very early about what it was like to be with people who cared and saw the details, and the way they read books and the way they responded. He wasn't going to respond with a boring old love letter. He was going to actually read what I'd left him, because he thought that would have meaning to me. And I think that if there's one thing that I've learned from these fellows that's been very important for the growth of Partners in Health, it is paying attention to the details. It is making good relationships. It is listening well and caring what other people think and do. I think I'd had a pretty great and worldly upbringing in England with caring and funny and warm parents, but the level of detail that I learned after I went to Haiti and then started hanging out with these guys and other people was very different than anything I'd learned from my wonderful, imaginative, social background in England. One other thing that occurs to me, we had a Partners in Health board meeting today, and we have the board meetings about 4 times a year. There are about 15 people on our board, and this is actually the first one Jim hasn't been to for a long time. And because he was obviously preparing with all of you today. But as we sat there and we wrestled with the effects of the last year that I know has had echoes and ramifications across for everyone and everywhere, we looked at what Partners in Health had been able to achieve, and looking at the growth of Partners in Health and working with this board. And I always think at the end of board meetings what it was like to be young and to have board meetings. Our idea of board meetings was our regular get-together, pizza, until 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning, and that's how we would make decisions.
Chinese restaurant.
Chinese
restaurants.
Right. Royal East.
But that's how we would do it early on. And I have to say that, in order to grow an organization and to have the echoing and amplifying effect of an organization like Partners in Health, you have to grow and you have to systematize. But every single time I attend a board meeting, I think about the ways that we built Partners in Health as a small group through informal and unstructured board meetings, but just connecting all the time.
I must say, our coworkers who came up here with it, they'll be alarmed. They've never heard us talk like this. Did you ever think that? About our friendship from in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So this is just for you guys. Going back to connecting, Jim and I were then students together, but it was really actually when Jim's father died that we reconnected, and this is back to the theme of looking out for one another. And he was in Korea, Jim was at the time, and I remember writing him a letter. And I'm really sorry to hear that your father passed away, and you must be. He'd come back to California where his family was. But I mean that was a simple thing. By the way, you guys don't even write letters anymore, right? Someone said on the way in, no twittering, and I just thought, what on earth is twittering? Actually, I know what it is, I must confess. But
you Twitter all the time.
Yeah, that'll be the day. Please don't Twitter the things that we're saying, by the way. This is just for the class of 2013. This isn't being taped.
What was your point?
It is. It is. And being broadcast and taped.
Broadcast?
Yes, it is.
This is not going to be good for my career at Harvard. Can I have a room here?
Yes, you can have a room here. So let me ask you something else. What was it that made us think that we could actually do this? We especially talked with you about it because you were the responsible one who was always trying to look at the books and make sure that we had enough dosh, as you used to say, to be able to do what we needed to do. But what do you think made us feel in the face of unbelievable odds at a time when there was no money for global health? There was
broadcast on TV?
Yeah. So on local Dartmouth TV, but it's okay.
What if my daughter sees it?
She'll love it. So
Go ahead.
Tell me. So this is a fun market, and we had debates about this all the time, whether we could actually do this or not. But what made us think that we either could or we should, or that it was worthwhile pursuing something so difficult?
I think in part it goes back to the optimism that PJ referenced. I think that although we all knew what it was we wanted to be connected to. I don't think that we didn't set out with a very specific strategic plan. We had a very broad plan, I think, and we tackled each problem as it arose. So I think in some ways, although it would be incorrect to say that we didn't know what we wanted to do going forward, and it was a broad plan, I also think that we weren't tripped up by thinking about the things that could possibly go wrong. If you think about it, whether or not one thinks about us as a reactive organization or anything else, I think it was actually very important for us to be able to do just that. When I'm thinking of all of the examples as they arose, and we brought more things and more people and more projects on board. And there wasn't a day that went by where we weren't troubleshooting or putting out fires and that kind of thing. But the big things that happened, worrying about money, worrying about colleagues, worrying about political situations where we were working and what that meant to the folks we were working with. As those problems arose, we put our heads together. We had a few people that we could turn to at times like that to give us support, and we moved forward. I don't want to suggest that it was a lack of planning or a lack of thoughtful process, but I do think that can sometimes get in the way if you have too much of a long-term goal in front of you. I think that
especially if you conclude that this is just an impossible problem. Paul, you said to me once, we were comparing experiences. I worked for a time in the Heinz ketchup factory in Muscatine, Iowa. And Pell worked in a factory as well. And do you remember, I don't even know if you remember this, you said, Jim, when you worked in the factory, you remember that feeling when the shift horn goes off and you're done? Said, we'll never have that feeling ever again in our lives. What did you mean by that? What did you mean by that, Pell?
I got exactly that same feeling when we were in Kenya, and I watched the
Yes.
Maasai be able to put their animals into the boma at the end of the day, and then they closed the gate and they went to sleep. And I remember
think you guys were saying exactly the opposite thing.
Really?
But go ahead. What did you mean by that, and why is it opposite?
I thought, I think we're saying the same thing, which is that how nice to be able to
have an end to the day.
Have an end to the day and be able to feel like you've completed everything you're supposed to complete. I think it's the same thing, comma.
Comma.
You didn't hear what she said, but that's okay. It's probably being broadcast on the internet.
Yes.
Or whatever. About the cows going home at the end of the day. I guess they do that in Iowa too.
They do, yeah.
We had been in Maasai land in the Shielu Hills in Kenya. It's, all that in that part of the world, and pastoralists everywhere. I mean, it must be. They have a tough life. I'm just saying, if crude generalizations, you look at what's happening in Kenya now with a terrible drought, and it's very hard. So I'm not trying to. We would never romanticize, the hard life of people who have an end of the day that's like getting those cows into the enclosure. It's called a boma. That's on the one hand, and on the other is, I think, I don't know if I recall the conversation, but if you look at someone who didn't get to go to Dartmouth or Wellesley or Duke or Harvard and doesn't have the chance to, and some of you come from families where, as I did, where this was the case, where my mother, she checked in the morning, and the best part of her day was punching that time card to
Winn-Dixie
to be to leave the grocery store. And so that's something that a lot of people in the world, they feel lucky if they have a job at all, right? But it's hard to not have this vocation, this goal that I think a lot of you in this room have. In part, I would say, born of our privilege. As a country, as this institution, Dartmouth. It is again an island of privilege, but I mean that as a optimistic. It's a wonderful thing that we should celebrate. I think that we have these, universities and these resources that will allow you not to just be punching a card. Although cultivating deep respect for people who have to do that or are lucky enough to do that, I think is also something that your generation can do. One of the reasons that Jim is excited about being here, and that we've been talking about it, and it's one of the reasons we're here. Of course, we're here because Jim's here, but we're also here to celebrate a generation that is not cynical. Your generation, again, gross generalizations are not, they're not even allowed in anthropology or sociology. I guess so generalizations are, but not gross generalization. But your generation strikes us as not cynical, as willing to engage in the world, as willing to, make errors and be wrong sometimes and be right often. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're teachers and involved in, in the endeavor of higher education. And that's true in the places we work as well. That's true in Haiti and Rwanda. We need to be more involved in bringing people on board. But on the one hand, we would love to have anybody would love to have a sense of, at the end of the day. On the other, it's hard to have to, just think that the end of your workday is the best time, of the day. And, you'll be lucky enough, many of you, not to have to do that. You'll be able to have projects that go on for years and aspirations that could go on for years. At least we hope that. I would hope that for you, and I think that was the nature of part of the discussion.
I also think, Jim, being able to bring other people on very quickly made a huge difference for us, so that by the time we were tackling some of the worst problems in Peru, we already had a group of people that we were working with that made us feel as though this was doable. Yeah. It was very rare for us to get down in the dumps.
Let me say something to you, the class of 2013. And I'll say it on Monday because I'm getting to, is it Monday?
Tuesday.
Whenever Jim gets inaugurated, coronated, whatever, crowned. And I'll be, I've been thinking about this, but I'll be here Monday too. I wasn't I wasn't being glib.
No, you weren't, no.
But this is what I'd like to say on Tuesday, and maybe I'm, messing it up, but there'll be a lot of people there beyond the most important people, or the people who are starting with Jim. And back to the question which you asked, which you can't really answer, but I would like to say one thing to all of you, and that is one of the reasons we had these big visions is because of Jim. You need people in your lives, and you will need this. Let me recommend this to everyone here. Find people who are going to push you and who are not going to be afraid of failure. And, because everyone fears failure, right? All of us fear failure. You go into, Ophelia goes into central Haiti, when she's 18, and all around, there are development projects that aren't really working well, and it's just there. Last week there are lots that are working well, but there's lots of failure as well. And there's failure in medicine, when you have a patient who dies, or when you fail to prevent an adverse event. There's failure in education. There's failure everywhere. There's failure in the economy. But you don't want to, and I'm echoing what Ophelia said, but I just like to pay a tribute to Jim, because so many of the things that he said or predicted or forecast or encouraged us to do, either they've been proven true or we've followed his advice, and then we've moved forward to the next level. Mm-hmm. So that's something that, I'll be expected to say things like that, on Tuesday. And that's part of the...
But you mean it, right?
But I mean it. It's actually sincere. That's part of what what one is expected to do at a rite of passage where a new leader is coming in, right? But this is for us, I know there's a big crowd here tonight. I know it's being broadcast. But I really want to say that to all of you who are coming into this institution at the same time that Jim is we think you're very, very fortunate to have, a visionary like Jim at the helm of Dartmouth. So, congratulations to all of you.
So we are very determined to have a conversation with all of you. Carol, you want to start?
I'm going to field questions and intersperse with questions from here. There are also people in some other auditoriums viewing, and they're able to submit some questions, so we'll add their questions in.
So have them line up at the two mics right there, right?
I think we have a couple mics, and so if people want to come forward, we're really looking forward to your questions.
Yeah.
I see some people. I told you there'd be lots of questions.
Well, let's get started.
Okay. I was going to do that really loud. Okay, we'll start on this side, and the first gentleman's question.
My question was, is this on? Yeah.
Tell us your name.
My name's Dahl. I think you might recognize me, but.
Oh, yeah.
My question, you were talking, sorry?
Go ahead.
All right. My question was, you talked about what prompted you to start Partners in Health and what led to such a vision. But my question, was I guess when you're at your low points, when all the obstacles are in your way, when everything was there, what got you through that? What kept you on track? What kept you with your eye on the goal? Obviously, you three people are amazing people, and you have that, I guess, that moral fiber that got you through it. But were there any other things that just kept you on the track to fielding global health problems?
Okay, great.
It was.
Ben, go ahead.
It was the friendships and the relationships that we'd made that kept us on track at different times and still do keep us on track. It was the small victories that we had, and it was, I think, feeling a connection to the projects and the people that we'd already made common cause with, feeling as though we couldn't let people down. So I think it would be those three things.
Let me just say there's always a tension, and it's a tension that we talk about all the time. And it's the tension between desire for personal individual efficacy, personal individual recognition, and understanding what it takes to actually make a social movement go forward, right? So, and we struggle with this all the time because everybody wants to be recognized. Everybody wants to feel that they have their own slice of the work, a slice of the pie. But you just can't get anything really important done working as a single person. I've never found that. We used to say, whenever we took on a project, we'd say, if we're really serious about this, then we have to work on at least 7 fronts at the same time. You've got to change policy. You've got to show it can be done. You've got to bring prices down. You've got to train new people. And so that's one of the greatest tensions and struggles that exist in any organization. Individuals' need for personal efficacy, and yet the need to work together. What I found here at Dartmouth is that I think we teach teamwork, how to be part of a group, how to treat people well, better than any place I've ever seen. But think about that. This is really important for you. There's just almost nothing you're going to be able to do without being able to work well with other people. Well,
I'm just going to add an illustration of what Jim and Ophelia have said. I was asking one of our proteges, a former student, actually a former undergraduate, who's now a faculty member. So this just goes to show, the continuity. We were talking about some what's called a programmatic area of work, and I said, I was saying, well, why do we have to reinvent the wheel? And it was a rhetorical question, but I got an honest answer that I wasn't expecting. And he said, because we want to reinvent the wheel. And I said, oh, you know, that's fair. In other words, the quest for personal efficacy is important. The quest for individual achievement is important. It is celebrated in places like Dartmouth. And then linking that, and all of you linking that to this broader, what Jim calls these cherished social goals that we might have for, you know, equity, decency, you know, we mentioned global health. Who wants there to be violence and strife and in the world? So I think that's something that kept us going. Sometimes it would be, you know, things would be going very poorly, but one of us, and it's a very huge team. We have thousands of people we're working with. We happen to be three who've been together for a long time, but there'd be other people on the team. Sometimes it would be, well, you know, we'd like to get this done for this one family, or because we think it would be a good thing to complete this project. You know, to be honest about this quest for personal efficacy, but we always wanted to be part of something larger. And, you know, that's a challenge, as Jim said. And you know, it's worth striving for.
That's what keeps you going. So, you know, the most brilliant systems are ones that don't settle for sort of banal truisms that are never true, right? Well, if everyone just doesn't care about being recognized, then everything will work fine. It's never like that. The most brilliant systems recognize individual effort, let people feel distinctive, let people feel they've made their own commitment, but have it all work as part of a larger whole. This is the struggle that we go through every time we've started any project. So think hard about how that works here. You know, some of you will, be trip leaders next year, will be on H crew or lodge crew. Those folks struggle a lot with how to make all that work. This is a really important lesson, and it is the thing. Having that stuff work is the thing that lets you get through the most difficult times.
Okay, I think we're going to ask your questions fairly quickly. There's a lot of people. We'll try to get through a number of them.
Hi, my name is Joseph Tannenbaum. Being that we're all, well, first of all, thank you guys very much for coming. I know you guys have very busy schedules, but thank you very much. This was amazing. Being that we're all 13s and we're all trying to figure out what classes we should take, I know I'm struggling with that. What was that one course that you guys took as undergraduate students that made you say, wow, this changed my life?
For me, that's a great question. I took a course called medical anthropology, 1980. And, you know, so again, it sounds so corny, you know, to say, wow, that changed my life. But it has the added value of being exactly true. That's supposed to make you laugh. But, so I took a class, you know, and it was, you know, I was a biochemistry major, and, you know, I had a great mentor, a biochemistry mentor at Duke. Her name is Barbara Shaw, and she's a professor there still. And I really, and I went and talked to her and said, you know, I really like this class in medical anthropology. She said, you should do, you know, what you really like. You should, if you want to go off and major in medical anthropology, knock yourself out. And I did. So.
But the true story is that he took the course in medical anthropology because he thought it was about medicine. He wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah, I was
didn't know what it was about.
Had no clue. I took medical ethics. Which was
anything with medical.
A waste of time. Sorry.
Min?
For me, it would have been a survey to English literature, and it was a year-long course, and it covered 1,000 years of literature, and it was so important to see how each piece of literature had built on each movement of literature, each separate, what's the word I'm looking for, PJ?
Sonnet. Sorry. Poem.
That all of this had built on one another. That there had been, that there was it was related to history. It was related to politics. It was related to, you know, it's a little bit about new historicism, and I think that was fascinating to me to see the links as I hadn't been, I had not taken anthropology at that point, had not taken sociology, so it was in some ways an eye-opening introduction to the way things are connected.
You know, the most important thing for me was actually my extracurricular activities, working with the Asian American Students Association and Third World Center. And I didn't really have a course that changed my life, but that's because I went to Brown and I didn't go to Dartmouth, the #1 educational institution in the world.
Just see.
You will all have a course
Just
that
see if
changes
he
your life.
says that at his alma mater. We'll see if he does. They're broadcasting this too. Can I say one thing, Carol?
Sure.
And that is, I want you to know, Mr. Tannenbaum, Joe.
Yep. You on?
You said Joseph. Excuse me. Let me not be too familiar after this talk. I still am in touch with the people who taught me at Duke. I just want you to, I want to get that out there too, is not only are we, you know, can you build friends as with your peers, but, you know, you can also make connections with the faculty and the university. And I know Dartmouth is famous for that kind of connection. And I think that's a wonderful thing about this place.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Raquel Bernard. My question has to do with probably the most profound statement I've found in Mountain Beyond Mountains. A woman was saying that if you want to keep these women from getting sick, give them jobs.
Yeah.
And what that made me think about, since I'm interested in educational policy, that in my mindset, I don't know too much about Haiti, but like in America, if you want to get someone a good job, a good place of employment, they need education. So we see how on the privileged side, people who have this education take that to the poor and help them by things that you all have done. But I'd like to look at it from the other side as far as educating those who are poor so that they can in turn help themselves. So my question is, how will a global improvement in education help and benefit global health?
Can I give that a try?
Yeah.
Because that,
a hard
the
question.
quotation, if I remember correctly, was from a patient of mine. That was 10 years ago that he was writing. Is that right?
Yes.
Did I get that right? You know, we collectively knew that was true a quarter of, 25 years ago, what she said, and it's still true today. I think what the trick is what we've been involved in is breaking this cycle of poverty and disease, and that requires, jobs, education, etc. There's many ways, and I hope this is, something that comes out of our comments too about courses that we liked, or the way we got involved in this work, is there's many ways to get involved in global social justice efforts. And I would argue, and I think all of us would argue, that coming at this through agriculture, clean water, a particular region of the world where you're going to have a concern with the well-being, medicine, global health, that should matter less than the goal, the vision of saying everybody deserves a chance to have a decent life, I think. And I think you're absolutely right, is how can we do that without education? And you can't, so it shouldn't be a competition between access to basic educational services and, say, access to primary health care, or access to cancer treatment and access to, treatment for tuberculosis. It can't be a competition like that. And that's where, again, your generation just seems to me way ahead of where we were. And we already confessed that we thought we were pretty advanced because we got involved in this work when we were in our 20s also. But you guys are way ahead of us.
Let me just say one thing, though. What we're going to try to teach you here at Dartmouth, you'll hear a lot of slogans. Education is the solution. Or, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man how to fish, he eats too much. I don't know what.
He has a protein. He likes tilapia.
But here's the point. There's not a single really tough problem I've ever seen that goes away with a simple single intervention. Very few are like that. And so what we're going to try to teach you here is the patience, the calmness, the persistence that's required to really get at all the dimensions of what makes the most difficult and important problems worth taking on, right? The most profound experience that I had in this regard was that we were in a slum in Lima, Peru, and we were doing what we always do, which is educating a group of community health workers to tackle a problem in an incredibly difficult, not as poor as Haiti, but poor urban area of Lima, Peru. And we went out into the hinterland in an area where the people were even poorer than the poor kids that we were teaching to be community health workers. And when they went out there and they met these people who had nothing and were basically undernourished and suffering from tuberculosis and other diseases, we said to them, so what's the problem here? And Carlos said, falta de educación, lack of education. And Paul was there and he said, oh really? So they have tuberculosis and they can't eat, they don't have any food, and the problem is lack of education? Where'd you get that from? And he was very honest. He says, well, that's what all the banners said in the campaigns that the government ran, right? And we said, well, what really is the problem? Is it, in other words, is it their fault that they have no food and they have tuberculosis? And if they had just educated themselves, everything would be fine? We're not saying there's an easy answer. We're saying that anything that you care about is going to be multidisciplinary. And you're going to need inspiration from Shakespeare and qualitative methods from anthropology, quantitative methods from economics, scientific and analytic methods. But there is nothing that's really important to take on that's reducible to a single factor. And avoid that temptation. Dig deep. That's what you're supposed to do here.
Next. Hi, my name's Becky Waite. And first, just in the same vein, I wanted to thank you three for coming. This is really quite a privilege. But my question is about working in an international setting and doing this kind of social justice work, public health work. You obviously have a lot of people behind you helping out. How do you generate the support and the energy? When people do domestic work or something that's a bit more accessible, there's that energy going into it that you can kind of feed off of to continue their support throughout the years. But when the program is a little bit less accessible, how is that done? How would you recommend?
You mean fundraising and all that kind of thing?
Fundraising, keeping people involved, keeping people active, keeping people caring.
Yeah. Well, Min's the master.
And I was having a hard time hearing exactly, but how to keep the interest going in an international program rather than a domestic, or just in general?
Just in general, yeah. I guess, yeah. This is something that we still have to tackle every day. We spent an hour and a half today in the board meeting talking about just these kinds of things. So over the years, it hasn't gone away. So thinking about the questions of how you communicate the messages, fundraise around those messages, keep people's interest alive. I mean, Jim and Paul and I had dinner probably close to 2 decades ago as we were starting up and trying to get people interested in the work in general, because I mean, for all of you who are interested in this work, and for those of you who may already be involved in organizations, small or large organizations, finding ways to spark the interest of other people to say, yes, we'll be part of this. How do you build an organization, build interest in, even a small movement around something? We went. Do you remember our dinner with Larry?
Weber. Yeah. He sent me
marketing.
Hold on.
A marketing guru.
It's a big broadcast.
And I'm not going to. We had dinner with this guy to say, because we had
already some success under our belt. We had, we were connected to a major university in Cambridge. We knew what it was we were going to do. We'd had some success. And we still felt as though we weren't getting the kind of broad traction with respect to development and raising funds. So we sat down, a friend of ours said, why don't you sit down with this marketing guru? He'll be able to tell you where the disconnect is. And wonderful, colorful fellow, spirited, and we had dinner with him. And he said in colorful language, the problem is that people care about what's under their noses, what's right here. They don't care, except he said it more colorfully than this. They don't care about the folks that you're dealing with in Haiti and in Peru and everything else. And we've heard a lot of those kinds of very sure statements over the years. This is why this won't work, and this is why this isn't going to happen. And what we kept doing is discussing amongst ourselves and with a broader and broader audience about why it will work, why it is that you make a connection, why it is that people started giving to us because, to be honest with you, first of all, because people are connected or love us. I mean, that's why you give to something. In the end, the connection that you all have with Dartmouth and will have, I have no doubt, in 10, 20, 30, 40 years is because of your love for Dartmouth. And I think that there's no question that getting people interested has got to be, your great goal of getting people interested in what you're interested in. And, being a good storyteller, making sure that you can discuss what it is that you're passionate about in really enlightening and interesting ways will be very important. Those are just a few thoughts I have, and there's tons of people with questions. Did you have anything to add?
Well, there's a related question that came from the other room that I think is really close. They asked, what would be your view of joining an organization versus starting your own? And I think you were really touching on that, but that's also something very relevant to a lot of students here. Will be debating whether to start their own or join. So they're interested in your thoughts on that.
Do you mean there's people listening in another room?
There are several, and the broadcast audience, but we don't have their questions yet.
PJ has a fear of the CIA.
No, I'm not thinking of that. I'm just thinking
Go ahead.
A lot
my
of
students
interest.
will. I know I'm just kidding. I know there are people in another room. That's a great question. And I think, again, back to Jim's point, and I don't know who, the person's in another room, we don't know his or her name, but I'd like to...
No name.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you, because this gives us a chance to say, on the one hand, again, the quest for personal efficacy is important. It's not to be denied. On the other, we need to have broad-based movements to move forward. Again, I'm sort of parroting Jim here. He's been saying this for years. These cherished social goals that we have. You can't do them alone. So if you can find, very pragmatic, if you can find people who are doing work that you'd like to do, and I think the previous question was also about how do you keep things going, personal engagement. Personal engagement sounds more attractive than the quest for personal efficacy. But if you can find people who are doing work that you can believe in, and even if you yourself can only do it, maybe a day a month or a week a month, who's going to stop you? Jim always used to say, there's not a long line of people waiting to serve the poor. You can get in that very short line. But if the line's a little longer and there are more people trying to do the same thing, obviously that should be celebrated. So if you can find, an organization, a group of people that you can work with, it would be great to join, something that's already going on. Now let me just say that I just came from, as I mentioned, I went to Haiti and then Rwanda. And President Clinton asked me, and asked to find out how many NGOs are working in Haiti. And this was last year after these hurricanes. And, I asked a friend of mine, a Haitian coworker, if she could find out, and we did a little background research. And then he said, well, we want you to compile a list, of a directory. And without making too much commentary, I would tell you that we've already got 8,000 NGOs. That's too many, right? That's too many to be coherent. They're not, the work isn't coordinated, you know, and you know, finding a way to bring these people together and these groups together and to coordinate is you know, it's a big challenge. Whereas when you go to Rwanda, they're saying, look, we don't want to have, you know, this enormous proliferation of, you know, NGOs and, you know, groups who are, we'd like this to be a Rwandan project, and you can join it if you'd like. You can be part of our vision. But we want some coordination. So I think there's a lesson to be learned early for your generation about finding ways to support something you can believe in and feel engaged in. And I'm sorry for such a long answer.
I'd say you have to be able to do both of those things. So the one thing, you know, I think some of my best experiences in life have been being a dedicated number 2 or number 3. When I was at the World Health Organization, I was a senior advisor to the Director General. Knowing how to be of service to the leader of an organization and knowing that it's not going to be about you, but it's going to be about carrying out, in this case, his agenda in the most dedicated way as a great follower, right? Paul in Haiti was a great follower of the patriarch who led the project, Père Lafontaine, and you know, he knew how to be a great secretary. Paul started off and was endeared himself to the people in Haiti because he was writing things. You know, he's one of the people who could actually write in French and wrote graduation diplomas. Do you still do that?
Yeah,
you still do that.
certificates.
So the point is,
You know, like penmanship.
penmanship.
I'm going to Harvard Medical School, and they're like, please write, you know, the primary school certificate, you know, like so-and-so graduates.
Right.
So humble, that's secretary work.
So you know, people misunderstand leadership. People think leadership is standing up and giving orders. But a big, huge chunk of leadership is knowing how to be a good follower. Because if you really know how to be a good follower, you have a much better sense of the people who you're supposed to lead are going to feel about anything that you do, right? So working for another NGO means that you put yourself at the service of a vision that's not your own, and you work your butt off to try to find out what it is that's at the core of this organization, and you make yourself useful. Pell used to say, you know, the best advice for you is make yourself indispensable by doing the things that absolutely have to be done, but are distasteful for most people. That's when you're going to get into the core of a particular project. So starting your own thing, if you've never been a good follower, you know, maybe that's okay. Maybe that works for some people. But have the understanding of what it's like to be of service to someone else and do it well.
Great. Next. Hi, my name's Daniela. I have a question. After having read Mountains Beyond Mountains and hearing you speak tonight, I was wondering, you three seem like you've led nearly perfect lives. So I was wondering if you could admit to any mistakes that you've made, either in your careers, undergraduate education, personal lives. Just admit to any mistakes.
I didn't hear that.
She said you've led nearly perfect life.
I heard that part.
But she wants to admit to a mistake or two, especially maybe when in your undergraduate years.
No, yeah. Just
Anytime. Any mistakes.
Where
Okay.
should we begin? Really?
You know, my biggest mistake is I did not apply to Dartmouth when I...
You know, not only did all of us make mistakes, but all of us had failures.
Yeah.
You know, there's an expression in medicine, you know, TNTC, too numerous to count. That's what we, you know, when you look at a lab result and there's too many, I know it's a bad metaphor, too many white cells, you have an infection, we say, you just write TNTC, too numerous to count. So they're too numerous to count. For example, how do you start a project the right way? How do you, you know, I'll give two examples, but one in chronological order.
Soldiers.
I'm going to go way back. You said undergraduate career. You know, if I I mean, let me give an example of you know, things that didn't go my way. Like, I applied for a Fulbright and to go to Senegal, and I didn't get the Fulbright, and so that's the best thing that happened to me, because then I ended up in Haiti. And so there's you know, it's not like that at all when you're trying to. And then I tried to go to one hospital in Haiti. These are failure stories, but I'll get to a mistake in a second. When I was just out of college, and you know, I wasn't welcomed. You know, I wasn't welcome there. There wasn't room for me, and so that's in addition to mistake. There's lots of, you know, you try, and you don't succeed, right? But the first project, to talk about the quest for personal efficacy, the first project that I was involved in Haiti was a total failure. First of all, the first year I was there I was working in a dumpy clinic that was a nightmare, and so was Ophelia. So I would regard all of that work in that first year as kind of worthless to the poor, right? The quality of the care, the quality of the diagnosis had no impact on their lives that I could tell, which is pretty shocking, right? Because, you know, it's a medical clinic. And so that's failure, but using that to create something better and to not give up. This gets back to questions that were asked many times. But the first project that I was involved in personally, where I could say, this is something I really wanted to do, was to build a community bread oven. And guess what it used as fuel? Trees and charcoal. And, you know, it was very destructive to the environment, right? To go into a place where deforestation is the major problem and, you know, build a tree-consuming bread oven. Not the smartest thing. You know, and you don't want to learn, you know, you don't want to fail to learn from other people's mistakes. So I would be, you know, pretty sad if I couldn't say, you know, don't make that mistake. You know, in a place where there's deforestation, better not to cut all the trees down all the trees for charcoal. You know, rocket science. But there's many, and I guess one of my questions is, can we learn from our own mistakes and from each other's mistakes, rather than making mistakes at the expense of other people? Medicine is like that, by the way. The practice of clinical medicine is, there's a book that we read when we were grad students. I don't know that Jim really read it because he was too busy regretting that he didn't go to Dartmouth. But it's by a sociologist about surgery. Do you remember this book? And it's called Forgive and Remember.
Yeah.
So it's really about making medical mistakes. And I think medicine is the kind of endeavor. You're looking out for other people's well-being. It's got to be. And Dartmouth has has Dartmouth Medical School, and this university has contributed to that literature, but how can we avoid medical error? You know, and I think that's an important area of pursuit too. But that, way before we were in a position to commit medical errors, we were making mistakes in our own lives that we just hope to, you know, do a little bit better.
Biggest mistake, not marrying Paul Farmer. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just appalled that the conversation has taken this.
It's better than a marriage, I tell you. It's better than a marriage. Yeah. The working together. The mistakes mistakes are enormous and really too many to count as undergraduates. But being able to count on each other as we made these kinds of mistakes. I mean, now, thinking about Partners in Health, where it is at this moment, you know, wishing that we had spent more time building partnerships earlier. And, you know, I think we were so busy trying to get stuff done as a relatively small group that we didn't pay enough attention to building partnerships with other groups and with ministries of health and that sort of thing. So I would say that we're still making mistakes, but as Pell said, I hope that we're learning from those mistakes.
Now, I know that many of you are also looking forward to meeting the guests. I think we're going to go to another room and have an opportunity to do that. So we're going to have just a couple more questions, and then we have one more thing to do here, and so we can save some time for you to do that. So I'm going to ask us to have another question here.
My name is Rebecca Drapkin, and I've always been interested in politics my whole life. And one of my favorite quotes from the book was, "Politics is medicine on a large scale." And I know that a lot of you have dealt with these issues on that level and have been in meeting with people in power. And what do you think is the best advice for people who kind of want to go into those, I guess, trenches on a regular basis? And how do you think is the best way to get the people up top to care about the people down below?
Jim?
You asking me?
No. Go ahead. No.
That's a great question. I mean, these are the conversation. Is, I got to say, is one that I hope I get to be part of here, and I'm sure Ophelia feels the same way. Aligning yourselves with the poor or the marginalized, aligning oneself, it doesn't have to be a political act, right? And are you there? It's Rebecca. I just can't see. I can't see that well. I mean, I can see well, but it's the lights. Aligning yourself, I would regard it as a moral act, not a political act. That is, say for example, you're a doctor and you're taking care of people who are sick. So you're well, they're sick. Or one of Ophelia's father's books is Matilda. What is the Trunchbull, the headmistress say? I'm big, you're small. The opposite of what I intended. Anybody read that book? So, the asymmetry that you're referring to, that, well, I think we can refer to, is there's room for, that's why it's important to be open to people of all kinds of so-called political persuasions, I would argue. And we're not very, ideological people in the sense that I would like to think we know. And when this is maybe, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but all of us have youthful enthusiasms. But I feel just as engaged now as I did when I was in college and more actually, than in these moral issues of our times, which I would not regard as political per se. So I think you can make, the optimistic point of this is, you can make an appeal to anyone in a position of power, when you have allied yourselves with people who deserve, which is to say that, people deserve, they deserve an education, they deserve access to clean water. Who really believes, for example, that people should die of malaria? I actually have never met that person. Not one. So, who believes that, if you get hit by a car and break your leg, but are, a Salvadoran immigrant, that you shouldn't have orthopedic care at Hitchcock? Nobody I've ever met, regardless of, I just using examples. So I think that appealing to the powerful and those with resources and power as, symbolic capital, the president of a university, say, is a powerful person. The president of the United States, a powerful person. President Clinton, who, we've been working with for years, is, the mission of social justice, the mission of providing these basic services is of universal appeal, regardless of what your own political persuasions or proclivities might be. That's how I would look at it.
But I would add this. I'd say that, Min talked about, Philly talked a little bit about it as well, that the way that you keep people interested, the way that you keep funders interested, the way that you change the minds of politicians, there are some tricks we've learned over the years and have worked with public relations people who help you craft messages and get it right. At the end of the day, though, if you've really aligned yourself with very, very poor people, and you've been there, and you felt the pain of a mother who can't feed her child, or you felt the pain of someone who can't get educated, if you felt that pain, and there's a deep authenticity to the way you present the problem, that is everything. So, in other words, there's no trick that I can tell you to convince these people to care. The trick is to actually go out there and feel the pain and the suffering and the injustice through your own skin so deeply that when you go to tell people about it, they can smell the authenticity coming from you. Now, it's different from the way you smelled coming down from the trips, but it's almost like that. You can tell. You guys had an authentic experience of not showering for 3 days. We could tell you. We could tell, and I could tell that when you were out in the woods, you had a very authentic experience of each other and of being out there. Now, you have to really take some gambles to put yourself in a situation where we used to put it this way. We used to say that in order to be a good advocate for poor people, you have to put yourself in a situation where you allow your soul to be fractured by the suffering of the poor, right? That's one particular area, right? But, how many experiences have you had in which your soul was fractured by the suffering or the injustice done to others, right? When you get there, people will smell the authenticity on you, and that's the most persuasive thing of all.
Well, I'm going to end with 2 questions, basically employment questions that came from the other room. The first is a question for Dr. Farmer. Paul, they ask, are you going to become a faculty member at Dartmouth? Clever. We won't hold you on record to the answer to that one right now. And the other one is a question that I think a lot of people really are interested in this room. How do you get to work at a place like Partners in Health? Is that something, Ophelia, you could give some people direction
Sure.
about how you could find that kind of opportunity?
Sure. I think that question, important question, touches on what we've been talking about today. It has to do with partnerships and which organizations that you choose to work for. I do think that there are many incredible organizations out there that some of whom we've been lucky enough to partner with. A few come to mind, including Heifer International, Women for Women. There are many, many different ways in which Partners in Health supplements, augments, and partners with other organizations. So Partners in Health now is an organization that has affiliations with different schools. At some point, hopefully, we'll have an affiliation with this one. We're already talking about and exploring ways to partner with Dartmouth. So that will be one area in the future that we can do this. The other one is that we have there are several things. We have an internship program. We work with students in different universities. We have a residency program. We're connected to the Brigham and Women's Hospital. There are ways that you can volunteer by going to the website or talking to any one of us. Jim can put you in touch with people at Partners in Health. But I think really the important thing is that there are all kinds of ways to do this work. Certainly we have benefited from the enthusiasm and skills and goodwill and commitment of students. We could not do what we do if it was not for the unfailing optimism and amazing partnership of students over the years. We couldn't do it. The things that have been done and are still being done by students that we work with really keeps us moving along. So we're completely open to that. And the question is, and I think it's something that Partners in Health continues to grapple with, is how can we make the best use of student commitment and energy? And I think it is, the best way to do it is not who is lucky enough to have the email of someone and can get in touch with the right person, but rather how can we systematize something so that this can be open to anybody who fits with this mission, who wants to work in this way. And it might be that, you know, those of you who want to work in engineering or want to be lawyers or anything else, that partnering with other organizations who are doing the kinds of work that Partners in Health is doing is the best way to do it.
And if I could, you know, add something as a teacher of undergraduates as well. You know, mostly we've been teaching medical students and doctors and sometimes nurses, and certainly in international settings, you know, health workers, in the United States, health workers. But don't be discouraged. You know, these kinds of connections take time to develop. That's one thing. A second is, for the next 4 years, your primary residence will be Hanover, New Hampshire. And it's a long way to New York or Montreal or Boston. You know, it's not like you're going to be able to volunteer every day or work every day as a volunteer at a place that's not, you know, physically near where you are, right? That's your mission here is primarily to learn and to be with each other and to study. So that said, you know, you're going to be living here. And just as people at Stanford are living in Stanford, and you know, on and on it goes, there's ways of being involved in solidarity groups, of learning from each other, of engaging the faculty. And with the faculty, you know, don't forget, you know, there are lots of connections between, you know, Dartmouth and the rest of the world through student organizations, some of which we've already had the privilege of meeting, through the work, and we're not, and one of the messages that we hope comes through is when we say global health, and I think I'll put this in my speech on Tuesday, because Jim always says, when we say, you know, think about global health equity, Boston's on the globe, and New York is on the globe. It's not the same as when we were students, when we were young, that what was called international health. You know, we're talking about something that is, you know, we have problems right here in this country. We have things that you can do right here in New Hampshire and Vermont and New England, and that's another way to get involved and stay involved. It's, you know, again, you could call it the quest for personal self-efficacy, as we used to, but you can also say personal engagement is important. You know, and that's something that you can do right here at Dartmouth. And I hope we can be, you know, part of that. I know we can be.
That's great. That's really, really wonderful. I know many students have more questions, but before we thank our wonderful panelists, we also have a surprise for our panelists. So I'm going to ask Vaidehi Majumdar to join me up here. And Vaidehi is a class of 2013 member from Virginia, and she's going to be presenting gifts of appreciation to our guest speakers on behalf of this wonderful class.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo! Yeah!
Awesome. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Should we put this on? Should we put them on?
Before she leaves, I want you to know that Vaidehi herself has been very actively involved in public health. I have to make sure I say it properly, but she established a malnutrition and education program at Simrol, which is a village in India. And so I think she has a very special connection to what you are doing and what you've done and what she's been doing. So thank you to you, too.
I think it's going to be hard to get a hand of the mic. Thank you, guys.
So finally, for all of you students who I know would love to meet these three guests, it's already getting pretty late, but I know you guys don't even think about going to bed for another couple of hours, but I think that they would like to have a chance to meet you, and they're going to meet in Alumni Hall immediately following this presentation. But as this morning, we're not shaking hands, we are fist bumping and hip swinging and whatever you decide to do. So I want to thank all of you for being such a great group. And thank you to them.